What's up? Uh,
I'm here.
You're here. We're here. You were gone last week. The podcast was also gone last week. So I figured today we would talk about your journey. I think some interesting things happened along the way.
Very much so.
So we'll find out about that. Yeah, we'll talk about those things. I don't want to preface our conversations too much. I know just as far as kind of bike shop stuff, we're pretty well into the season. This past weekend, we just wrapped up the last Enduro for the Missouri Enduro Series. This weekend coming up is the race at Robinson Bluff. So that's going to be an Enduro. It's only like 2 or 3 miles. I think it's capped off at like 50 racers. $65 to get in. You can still sign up for that. So for sure, check that out. There's camping available there. It is private property. So you can camp there. You show up, pay your fee, and you're good to go. So a bunch of rock climbing routes as well if you're into that type of thing. But definitely go check out. Why do I want to keep calling it Don Robinson? Robinson Bluff. Look them up on Facebook, Robinson Bluff, MTB Trails. But really cool. A guy put in a ton of work out there, really good rider, and talented excavator. So he did his thing out there. So we should go out and check it out, see what he's done. So that's cool. Other than that, shop's been busy. I mean, it's springtime. People are out riding their bikes. We finally had a little bit of break in weather here in St. Louis. You got really lucky. Your entire trip was free of rain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's nice. Maybe that was the highlight. But yeah, so you just got back today. You got the whole reason you went to Indiana was you have your trusty mechanic, your vehicle mechanic up there. So you dropped your van off to have the engine rebuilt on it.
Replaced completely. Took the old one out. Yeah.
And it's a 1985. So that's older than that's probably right about the age bracket of most people who are listening to this. Most everybody
10 years older than me.
Yeah, I would say most people listening are somewhere between 30 and 45, maybe 25 and 45, but basically 35 to 45. So yeah, most of that would have been right around the time everybody was born. I could use like a new engine put into my brain probably right about now. That's why we didn't do the podcast last week. I've just been dead. If you've been in the shop, had to be here all the time, which is probably good for the shop. So I've been working a ton, just a lot of stuff going on. Everybody's out of school and kind of making plans for the summer and stuff. So we've been doing a lot of that type of thing. But was your last week relaxing? Do you feel, because you've been off work essentially the last week, do you feel that was time spent resting, or do you think you got like the refresh or the rebuild on your mind, same as your car got?
Mind, yes. Physically, I pretty much spent all the fuel I had. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. I don't vacation, if you could call it that, usually includes absolutely zero downtime. I just gotta move. If I'm not passed out at 8:30 at the end of the day, then I haven't done something right.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to Louisville and I didn't stop. I rode for 10 straight days, 615 miles in those 10 days. I just kept going.
What day did you leave?
I left a week prior to Saturday, so
it was Saturday.
It was the 28th.
Okay, because I think we last talked on that Tuesday on the podcast, and you were prepping for your ride. I think it was raining previous to you leaving, right? You didn't ride much previous to...
No, I didn't ride at all that week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 0 miles.
Correct. Yeah.
From Tuesday till you left Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay. So 0 miles there. And how are you feeling Friday night about the ride going into Saturday?
I felt I definitely had a lot of cooped up energy. So I think that really served me. But I was mentally thinking, I don't really know that I can pull this off. And so it was more of a mental hurdle than a physical one. The first day, 100 miles, fairly flat, really no wind until my route turned south. Wasn't too hot, no rain, like honestly ideal conditions for riding on the road. But I mean, 100 miles in one day is pretty standard for me. It was the ones that I had to do immediately after that were scary. And judging by, how I felt at the end of that one, I'm like, yeah, I think we're all right, but I don't know for how long.
Okay. So I pulled up your Instagram. So yeah, you started downtown St. Louis at the Arch.
Yep. Big mistake.
So for folks not, St. Louis is downtown St. Louis is not doing great as of lately. If you were visiting St. Louis, I would say maybe avoid that area altogether. Just come out here to West. We're in West County in West St. Louis. Out Highway 44 is a really nice hotel here, the Holiday Inn. That's super cool. Or you can get KOA. There's KOA here, cabins and whatnot. Stay out here. If you need to go visit the Arch, if you're visiting town, then drive up from here. It's only a 20-minute drive or whatever. But this is really, I think Eureka is the perfect place to stay. I mean, if you're into outdoor stuff, obviously, even if you're not, it's safe out here. Everything you need is out here. We have a Walmart, and then we have obviously all the parks and trails. And then if you want to go up to City Museum or the Arch, plan ahead, do that, drive down there, maybe take an Uber and then come back. An Uber ride's gonna be like $50. So Uber's gonna be expensive from here. But either or. So down they have a riverfront trail. The water was high because it had rained that entire week previous. And Linda just got pissy about something down there. So there's the riverfront trail, and it goes obviously in front of the Arch, but once you get about 300 feet up from that, there is a giant concrete wall. You did not take a picture of that.
I did not, because I was under, I needed to keep moving. I was not going to stop and be like, oh my God, look how awful this was. I felt very unsafe. There really wasn't a whole lot of activity, but just being by myself, my just self-preservation mode was on high alert. And so I'm just trying to get to this bridge to cross out of downtown St. Louis. And then you can, chain link fences. I made multiple reroutes to try and find this trail that was supposedly there. And there's just no obvious trail anymore. And I don't know if it's because of the flooding, because it's just been neglected, because there's not a whole lot of people using it. But
no, the trail's not there anymore because the homeless people or homeless encampment took over some structure on the side of the river, slightly up from the Arch, and it's there's casinos there and stuff. And it basically seems like they just walled those people off. Yeah, I don't know exactly what the deal is there, but it is friggin' ridiculous. It's insane.
I did see it, and whenever I was trying to kind of I basically got boxed in, and so I had to turn around and ride past it twice. And I, turned, and there was a shorter concrete wall that there was a gap in it where I could ride around. Almost ran over a dead rat. That kind of really gave me perspective on where I was. Vehicles parked where they shouldn't have been parked, with just people just kind of hanging around. Weird activity for 6:30 in the morning. And it just, I ended up having to ride through this industrial park with a bunch of semi trucks just in and out. I didn't belong there on a bicycle, but that's how I had to access the trail. But there were no signs that that's how you got there. So it was really the roughest part of the trip was getting out of St. Louis. And it was also the roughest ride that I've ever experienced on a bike.
Yeah, the streets are super beat up down there. I'm showing on the screen kind of to people some of the images of that part that I dropped you or that you started your journey at. And yeah, it's not a place to ride a bike, not a place to start a journey. Probably, again, St. Louis, downtown St. Louis, just not in good shape. There's been a lot of shootings lately down there. The mayor is now talking about they're banning the electric scooters. This came up today. I guess over the weekend, there was a bunch of youths outside of some nightclubs or wherever they were. There was a shooting at Ballpark Village. They were shooting outside of clubs and stuff down there. There's big fights, and I guess what's happening is underage people, or maybe just I don't want to get into what I think of what this scooter ban is really saying, but they're banning scooters because of the violence that's happening in downtown St. Louis, and they're saying that it's the scooter taking people from allowing people to then get to places to start crap. So essentially, the city's solution to violence in their city is to say, let's just restrict their movement.
Okay.
Not a great plan, but so yeah, scooters are likely to be banned. I don't know if that was effective immediately, if there needs to be a vote on that. I think the way I read it, it seemed that was basic, kind of effective immediately. I don't know if that's going to be possible because I'm sure those companies have contracts and stuff down there. But either or, that's not great. I kind of took it. I'm a male and I understand the risks I'm taking, but I do find it fun to ride around downtown on my longboard. It is neat. Just kind of, I'm big on like my favorite things when I'm traveling. Not my favorite things. It's heartbreaking to see, but like it interests me to see like old buildings, like abandoned buildings, like dilapidated buildings. It's definitely history, and like, I think we talked about this last time we were on here actually. But like I just look at, because I know the amount of work it takes to like build a business or to get the capital to build a structure and to do all this kind of stuff, and then to see it all just abandoned, and that was somebody's dreams and work, and then it all just kind of goes away, and then people don't care. So always weirds me out when I see those. So I enjoy going downtown because that's basically all downtown St. Louis is at this point is abandoned buildings and graffiti all over the place. And so I enjoy riding down there, but I also, I have things to keep me safe when I'm doing that. I'm constantly looking, like I am vigilant at all times when I'm down there. And I would recommend, if anybody goes to do anything downtown, that you need to assume you're in a war zone. Like it's not quite that bad, but like that's a mentality.
I couldn't imagine like starting that trip in the evening. Like as much activity that was just strange at that time in the morning on a Saturday. Just nothing like where I came from.
Yeah, it's a shame. I don't know what the fix is for downtown St. Louis. And I grew up there. I went to Gateway. Like, I grew up in Dogtown, but I wasn't allowed to. My parents, we were right next. So Dogtown basically sits in between Highway 40 and Highway 44. And then right on the other side of Highway 40 is the zoo and Forest Park and all that. My house was like 2 blocks away. I was not allowed. I could go as far as I wanted towards 55 and like, I guess west. But I was not allowed to cross Highway 40, which was 2 blocks from my house. That was the barrier. My parents were like, nope, you cannot go past there. Just because it's always been that way. It's always been super dangerous. And I don't know, dude. It's definitely worse. I mean, I obviously I've never been a rule follower. So I was always in Forest Park and doing my thing and whatever. But yeah, and it wasn't as dangerous as it is now. I don't know. It's a shame. Maybe we should move on past me just saying I don't know and just jumping around why St. Louis is an issue. But you want to come out to especially if you live up there, come hang out here in West County. I even get weirded out now because I spend so much time here in Eureka. I get weirded out like when I'm back in Jefferson County or like, more rural parts, because I bought a motorcycle. Diesel prices are up. So the truck's out and bike's in. So I've been just riding around a lot this last week on my motorcycle and going to small rural towns. And I forgot what a majority of Missouri actually looks like, or, rural areas of states. Like, I don't know, dude. It freaked me out.
I
was like, just get me back to St. Louis County. Like, gosh darn, like this is too much. Like, God.
I saw a lot of rural Midwest going through Illinois because I was not riding main thoroughfares to get to where I was going. I was taking a lot of back county roads. I was trying my hardest to avoid gravel. That did not work despite all of my research.
You did for a few days, though.
Yeah. Well, and it slowed me down the one day to the point where I'm like wildly frustrated. But I'm going through a lot of those rural towns, and I never really ended up in a spot where I felt unsafe, but I also kind of grew up in that kind of rough country community, but still it was like, this is people's hometown. Like, it isn't inherently dangerous. It's just a different atmosphere. But I really didn't find anything weird until I got to Evansville, Indiana, which I have been to multiple times for bike races, and I've had friends there. I went on a date there one time, and for some reason, the hotel that looked perfectly normal online, I show up there and I'm like, I didn't know that Evansville had an area like this, but it kind of felt like a micro bubble of just this 2-block area got left behind.
Yeah.
And that kind of started the trend of, where the heck am I and how do I get out of here theme that kind of followed the couple days after. But riding through, rural Illinois, especially when I wasn't even around a town, was the most secure that I felt, which I feel like might be counterintuitive.
Yeah. How did people who care about you feel about you doing this journey alone as a female?
Well, so the thing is the whole trip was born out of those people not necessarily being like, you got to pick your van up, but you're on your own. I'm like, all right, I'll do that the way that I have to. And then I did get some, I wouldn't say criticism, but just kind of like the tone of, you're not really serious. And like, I am serious. I've got the whole thing planned. Here we go. And then I made it. And then people are like, oh, congratulations. Wow, that's awesome. And like, almost kind of like, where was this exuberance when I was starting the trip?
Sure.
There was the subset of people that know me and they're like, this is very Genna-esque.
Dude, every picture from your journey is a gravel road, just FYI.
I love gravel, and that's the lesson that I learned from this trip is anytime I'm going to do like a cross country kind of,
just know gravels can exist.
Yeah, just ride the gravel tires. I saved no time riding 28s on that trip because of those 2 days where I had to walk some sections because it wasn't just gravel. It was awful gravel. It was too rugged. It was too much of a risk for my wheels to continue to ride it. It was also exhausting.
And you rode your Terra?
Yes.
Yeah. And what rubber were you actually running?
So I had 28 Specialized Turbo Pros. And they were really hardy. They stood up to the test. Didn't have any flats. Didn't have any punctures. Like, great, but when some of these gravel roads weren't typical Midwest limestone. They were like, you'd put this in your fish tank.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I've been spending the last 5 minutes staring at this computer screen as you were talking, cycling through your pictures as you discuss things. And that's why I brought up the gravel, because I'm like, obviously everyone's going to see pictures of gravel the whole time she's talking. I wasn't actually sharing the screen, so no one saw any of that. I also 10 minutes ago was showing pictures of the riverfront. I don't know if anyone actually seen that or not, but either way, that's probably
my word for it. I hit some rocks.
Yeah, I think, all right, we are on a shared screen right now. So yeah, that's hilarious. But I think I lost the ability to operate it.
Yeah, none of these unpaved roads were marked unpaved on the 3 different apps that I used to check for that stuff ahead of time.
How did you navigate?
So I'm used Ride with GPS to map my routes. I double checked with Strava to make sure that looking at heat maps, because it'll show what things are. And there were definitely areas where nobody was riding, but I imagined it was just because it was so far away from any municipality that there probably just aren't that many people to actually. And then there's a specific website called Gravel Map, if you're not familiar, that actually will show you not only roads that are gravel, but routes that cyclists are frequently doing gravel rides on. So there are multiple resources to check, okay, what's safe, where's passable, where it might be a little bit sketchy. And I found nothing on any of those sites that said that these roads were unpaved. Ride with GPS usually will tell you if a section's unpaved. It won't tell you how.
So what does that tell you about your choice of what your ride was? It means probably no one else is doing
Pretty
that.
much, yeah, that's exactly it. There was just no data
Or
for
riding those
the area
areas,
that
yeah.
I was in that I hit gravel. There's just people just aren't riding there. There's no cyclists in that area, which was really cool.
Kind of like an explorer.
Yeah.
You were like Lewis and Clark, but you went maybe the opposite direction.
I mean, I'm sure people have been out there, but
Is that the Kentucky River that would go up near Indiana?
It's the Ohio that borders Kentucky and Indiana. That doesn't make sense, but it is the Ohio River.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where's the Kentucky River's down?
Yeah, it's a less major river.
Right. Okay. I think I've crossed the Kentucky.
I don't even know if I have.
Out of a sketchy part of Illinois. Now that I think about it.
Probably the same area.
All right. So just to summarize what your ride was. So day one, you left from St. Louis and you went to Mount Vernon, Illinois.
Yeah.
That once you got out of St. Louis, went smooth from there?
It did, yeah. So I rode the Madison County Trail for a significant part of that. And then I eventually dove, it was like north of O'Fallon, where I turned left and I'm just country roads all the way to Mount Vernon. Went through Centralia. That was kind of the major town. I stopped for breakfast / lunch at this diner in Carlisle, and I was sick. That was 61 miles in, and of course, you know, the waitress there was just oogling over, like, what the heck are you doing? This is so cool. What do your parents think? Like, you know, typical questions like that, and got a free cup of coffee out of it. Like,
nice.
But yeah, that day was really smooth. It was flat as a pancake. It's Illinois, but I mean, like, I didn't run into any issues navigationally. No dogs, no crazy drivers. Like, honestly, the whole trip, I didn't really have issues with drivers one time.
Yeah, Illinois does have a really nice greenway system. I guess through a certain part. Where did it kind of end out at? I didn't
go all the way to the end of it.
Well, because even in Mount Vernon, is that MCT trail as well, or is that a different bike trail that goes through there?
I'm not familiar because once I got to Mount Vernon, I was just on roads.
Right. Okay. So how many miles did you do day one?
101.
Do you remember the elevation?
I think it was like 1900.
So
if that, it was over 1,000, but not over 2.
So you woke up on day 2 then. So this is Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
You headed out from Mount Vernon and you went where?
Evansville, Indiana.
Evansville, Indiana.
That was the worst day because that's where I hit gravel. I had to shoulder surf on Illinois 15 for 45 miles. And that, luckily, it kind of paralleled the roads that I had planned to ride, that I'm just like, I don't know how many more of these are gravel, so I'm just going to avoid all of it. And
that started once you got to Indiana?
No, this was way before Indiana when I hit the gravel. But then when I got to Mount Carmel, that's where you cross into Indiana. And then I hit more gravel after that.
Okay.
And then I also turned into a headwind coming directly out of the south. And so I was already stressed, just because mental stress has just as much impact on the body as physical stress. So
it's hilarious. Right next to Evansville, there's another city called Mount Vernon. So you basically pedaled from Mount Vernon to Mount Vernon.
There's a Mount Vernon everywhere, yeah. Like, but yeah, I did get to Evansville, and it was just, I was having a hard time. That was where I was really starting to worry. Am I going to pull this off? And it was mostly not necessarily from a fitness standpoint, but I was carrying a backpack, which I don't usually do. Mm-hmm. It probably weighed 15 pounds, no more than that. So really not a lot, but it is a lot for an untrained body. And I also had weight on my bike that was not centered. I had a heavy feed bag on my bars. And so whenever I was surfing the shoulder in Illinois still, and I had that crosswind, I'm trying to handle my bike over and I have the weight. And so my left shoulder just started to scream at me. And I actually stopped and took ibuprofen halfway through that ride.
You had to dope.
Yep. Doping. Yep. Done it.
Yeah, well, I won't let the UCI know, but I don't know if that was right. How many miles did you do on Sunday then?
110.
So 110 from Mount Vernon to Mount Vernon or Evansville, whatever. How much of that was gravel?
I want to say maybe 3%.
3%. Now, did you ride it?
I rode as much of it as I could, but then eventually I started feeling the body fatigue and just like, I'm going to crash if I keep doing this. And then the surface kept getting worse. I mean, it almost is more exhausting to try and hike it in road cleats, but that is what I had to do just because I didn't want to lay the bike down and like snap my derailleur hanger or something.
Right.
Like I didn't want to run that risk.
Right.
But yeah, it basically, when I hit gravel, I had to make 2 major detours, and ride
How many
not
miles do you
major
think you had to
highways,
like
but
hike a bike, or what? I don't know what you would call it on the road.
as
Push
far
a
as
bike.
actually hiking it, less than 2.
That's a lot of miles.
Yeah.
2
but-
mile walk is for normal people, like just everyday people, maybe people who don't ride bikes and stuff. If they went for a 2 mile walk,
Mhm.
they would be like, "Oh, I really did something today." So
With a bike and in road cleats and on unstable ground. Yeah.
right.
I mean,
I would have personally taken my shoes off, put my shoes for my bag on, and then
that
walked it.
would have probably made more sense, but that's not where my brain was.
Right.
I was just like, I gotta get out. Yeah, I was mad. I mean, there was the second time it happened, I'm like, are you kidding me? And
Right.
I saw the highway in the distance, but it was also in the distance, and so I had to walk all the way to
Because
it.
you planned this all out. You assumed none of this was
Yeah,
going to be happening.
I did a lot of research. I routed the route that I did to avoid the gravel that I knew I was going to hit in Indiana. I did effectively avoid all of that, but I didn't avoid what was unmarked, and it's just because there's no data on it.
So what time did you leave on Sunday morning? Do you remember?
Too late. I think not until like almost 8.
Okay. And then what time did you arrive in Evansville?
Almost 6.
So 10
which
hours
is
on the bike?
Way late, yeah.
Yep.
Including stop time. That's way later than I really wanted to get there.
And I was just going to ask something, and then I closed that, and I was like, oh, shoot. But then I was like, I meant to close it. I don't know.
Well, the day after that.
Oh, yeah. So you get in at 7 o'clock or 6
Mhm.
o'clock. You get to your hotel in Evansville, and that was the Shady Hotel?
That was actually the best one.
That
It was
was
just in a
excellent.
shady spot of town.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you get there, and what do you do? Like, obviously, you probably weren't in a great mood that evening. You were a little kind of defeated. What did you do that night? Like, what did you want to go do?
So I immediately just went and ate, because that had to be my priority the entire time. It's like, even if I'm tired, if I eat, like I can pull this off. And I made several phone calls to be like, please keep me off of the edge of this. Like, I don't want to like be upset, like this is fun.
It's supposed to be fun.
Yeah. So I'm making phone calls, like updating people, because I had like this list of people that I'm like, hey, I'm safe. Like, I made it to where I'm supposed to. This is my situation, that kind of thing. But I kind of knew as soon as I got there, like, I don't have time to eat, decompress, check up on everybody, shower, make sure my stuff is ready for the next day.
You got in too late.
Yeah. And because the next day was supposed to be 150 miles, and I knew I had to start at 5 a.m., no later.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just like, I have to get enough sleep, but I also can't go straight to sleep. And so I just felt pressured. I'm like, I have time. I can rearrange things if I need to. Like, this is fine. And I also was really struggling with just shoulder pain from my backpack from 200 miles, the last 2 days. And so I just booked a hotel in Owensboro, where I didn't plan on staying, and just did the 44 miles from Evansville to Owensboro the day after as kind of just a rest day, which ended up being the worst one, if you can believe me. Just physically and mentally, I was not having it on that 44-mile day.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If everything was easy, you would have just went and rode 150 miles.
Yeah.
So, I'm showing that now, and I think that's important for people to know. Like, yeah, you realize you were there. You weren't there. You weren't working. You weren't racing. You didn't have to be anywhere at a certain time. So you made, I think, a very good call to kind of slow things down, slow the pace down, and give yourself a day. I mean, 50 miles is still, especially after riding 200 miles previous, is still a lot of mileage to put in. But you did give yourself that little bit of a break instead of just pushing through, which I think is really smart. And, people have to keep that in mind. Like, when you're out doing stuff like that, you do kind of get that focus of having to complete the goal.
Yeah.
And
I did have to battle with that a lot, because I really just wanted to be like, this is what I planned. This is what I'm going to do.
Right.
I probably could have pulled it off, but I think I was rewarded for not doing that, which we'll get to.
No.
But the real highlight of that day was in Owensboro. Because I had switched my plan. And so I bumped back another hotel to a different day. And then I, booked one that I originally didn't plan to stay at. I didn't read the reviews.
In Owensboro.
Yes. And so I get to this one and it's a motel, which I already didn't like, but whatever. It's a place to sleep and shower. I'm not asking too much from it, but I should have really paid attention to when I walk into the lobby and there's a glass barrier with a microphone, which I've never seen in a hotel before.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a COVID protocol, because we just got out of a time where everybody had the plexiglass up in front of their registers. So I just thought it was that. But no, this was a permanent fixture. And then there were signs saying you may not receive mail at this location starting in April of 2022. Very recent change. You must move rooms every 28 days. I'm like, oh, okay, people live here. I live in a van. I'm not going to judge if you have to do something like that. Like, that wasn't my initial thought. But shortly after I got into my room and I start walking just across the gas station or down the street to the subway, I realized this is not a good spot. I just, all evening, all night, just people saying weird stuff to me as I'm walking. And then the real kicker was when I'm in my room and I'm like, okay, not going outside again until I leave in the morning. Just, I'm done. I'm staying here. Some guy comes pounding on my door saying room service.
What time was this?
This is like 7 p.m.
Not much room service can be had at 7 p.m. typically.
Or in a motel.
At a motel.
Yeah. So I just froze.
Why didn't you just say pizza? It's a motel.
Yeah. I was just been like, you had a wrong door. But I was just
if
like,
you
what?
come to my door, knock, and say pizza, I'm gonna at least check the camera before I just ignore
Well, see,
it.
that was another thing is there was no peephole. Like, I couldn't even look outside without moving the curtain. Yeah, there was a lot of, and there were air holes, like gaps in the door. Like, the door didn't completely fit the jam. So just, like maintenance issues.
And typically, if you're driving to a hotel, you could get there and be like, oh,
this isn't good and move.
Here
and yeah, but
and
because
go
I was
to
on a
another
bike
hotel.
and there's so much activity outside my door, even starting at 7 p.m. I'm like, I don't even want to leave. And so, and it got worse after I went to bed because I made sure, like, okay, I didn't have 150 miles to go. I had 120, but I still knew
from Owensboro to
Corydon, Indiana. Yeah. So I was preparing for that. And I'm like, I really got to rest.
So that's the Ohio River that you're going across.
Yeah, twice.
Back and forth.
And I think it was right around 11. I think I had dozed off for a little bit, but I started smelling something burning. But it wasn't like place is on fire burning. It was either somebody burned popcorn or they were cooking meth. Like, there was no middle ground.
Smoking meth, maybe?
I don't know, but it was really strong.
I thought that was a Missouri thing. I thought once you get out of Missouri, you didn't have to worry as much about people on meth.
No,
that's everywhere.
Yeah, that's everywhere,
that's
unfortunately. But yeah, and I hear somebody is walking laps back and forth in front of all the doors, listening to very loud music on their phone. At one point in the night,
headphones?
No courtesy. And then at one point, some guy is moaning in the parking lot like he's in pain.
This was in Owensboro.
Yeah. All of this was in Owensboro. Everything. Yeah.
Is there anything in Owensboro? Like, did you do any?
Owensboro has a really cool waterfront. Like, yeah. I mean, like, that was probably my favorite stop as far as actually taking in the scenery. But the part of town that I was in didn't look rough. But when I got to this motel, it was just like its own bubble, and the people around. Like, I left my room and some guy's like, nice tan lines. And I'm like, I'm used to that, but his demeanor was weird.
Hold on.
You're trying to find my tan lines. I don't know as if I actually have a photo that.
Oh, now I'm just solo. No, don't make me solo. Genna solo. Hold on. I'm flipping us around. Now it looks like we're not looking.
Are you trying to actually a live depiction of my tan lines?
Hold on, yeah. Well, now I can't see your legs. You lowered your
I can
legs.
only show the arms.
Okay, there's your arms.
Yeah, I mean,
Pretty
and so
solid.
that I don't hide them. But I'm walking and this guy's like, nice tan lines. And he just erupts into this most maniacal laughter. Like, he had just told the best joke. And he didn't make eye contact with me either. It was just kind of like he was talking to himself. I'm like, druggie, got it. Keep walking.
Sure he was talking to you?
I'm absolutely. Who else? Who else? I would have felt much better if I
I know,
wasn't
dude.
by myself.
And in the short time you were here at the shop tonight, like everybody made mention of your tan lines.
And it's only because I'm in a mountain bike shop.
Yeah. I was like, what?
Yeah. But I've never thought much of it. And, you know, my own siblings, whenever I finally, you know, I visited my parents because I diverted 18 miles off my original route to go visit them. And my siblings are both calling me hot dog legs.
Okay.
For 24 hours straight, and to the point where they go and grab an Oscar Mayer from the refrigerator and come out and just exact color match like Sherwin-Williams himself.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's sibling harassment. Even when we're all adults, it still exists.
I'm going to keep my jokes to myself. I'm not going to make any jokes about anything along those lines. So your trip then took you from Owensboro, which was a pretty area. You had some pictures on your Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we either
of Owensboro itself. Yeah, it has a really cool little downtown area. It is a city, but it's a lot like Louisville. It's a little big town.
Earlier, I had the picture up. I thought, oh yeah, maybe that's not the right place. The Big Four Bridge.
That is in Louisville. Yeah, so that's after I actually got to town.
I'm going to stop trying to share screens because it's just distracting me from actually talking to you and finding out what happened.
You plugged me in the last episode. They can find me.
Yeah, well, I'm just trying to look at the pictures and the map, but then like the map really doesn't help us much at all. So day 1, 100 miles, coming out of downtown St. Louis, harrowing first 10 miles. I think that's good. I mean, if there was any concerns for your safety or if you were at all nervous about such a thing, I would think doing that at the beginning, everything else would just seem, less dangerous. So maybe that was positive.
I was relieved once I kind of got away.
Yeah. So you got out of downtown St. Louis. After 100 miles, you stopped in Mount Vernon. You went another 101 miles to Mount Vernon or Evansville through gravel. It sucked.
Yep.
You were very mad at the end of the day. You just called people and yelled at them, it sounds like. That evening, and then you said, I'm just going to take it easy the next day. I'm going to be responsible about this. Did 50 miles, stayed in a random motel that you didn't vet out properly, and it was full of homeless people essentially, and drug addicts. So you got a little taste of that again, and then you left there, went 120 miles to
Corydon, which is 20 minutes driving south of where my parents live. So basically, once I got across the bridge, across the Ohio into Indiana again, I was home.
Okay. So it was 120 miles from Owensville to there. So that was the end of day 4.
That was 4, yeah.
So it's the end of day 4. You got into there. Did you go directly to your parents' house?
I stayed in a hotel in Corydon just because I knew that I wasn't going to be very sociable. And I'm like, I really want to sleep. I really want to eat. I'm just going to relax. And then I also, I'm keeping tabs on the mechanic, and he has my van, and, putting a whole new engine in is a massive job. And they're finally like, oh, we got to get this, this, and this because there were other issues, And so I'm like, well, I'm no longer on a time crunch, so I might as well just kind of slow it down again, make sure that I'm resting, eating, just enjoy my time on the bike. And so I went from Corydon to my parents' house the next day, 18 miles, basically recovery.
How did the 120-mile ride feel after that?
That was like I was kind of getting at earlier. That was the reward. That was the most scenic part of the trip. It was the one with the most climbing, but that's the kind of riding that I'm used to. And by that point, my body had adapted to having extra weight on my bike and on me. And so I just didn't even notice it. But yeah, it was gorgeous. Like,
did you do any doping that day of ibuprofen?
I did not. I did not.
Okay, so you only had to dope on day 2.
I did dope with a lot of caffeine. I don't know if that counts.
Okay, that does count. Yeah. So it's funny because like that, I mean, you would have been 250 miles in at that point, or probably by the time you really started enjoying your day, 300 miles or so in over the past.
That was where I realized my engine went a lot deeper than I thought it did.
Right.
I was also compelled by the fact that I was alone. Like, I had bailouts if I really needed them, but also there's a pride factor. Like, no. But yeah, like that day, I was just like, I was definitely tired, but it wasn't like oh my God, I'm so tired and miserable. It's just like I notice it, but I've done everything mostly right. And so
Didn't you say you stopped at a bike shop one of those days?
Yeah, and in Mount Vernon, there was a bike shop.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
What
but
did you stop in the bike shop for?
I had
like
dry
bike shop
chain.
talk.
Yeah, I had dry chain, and I was like, but you know,
Did you
100
bring
miles
chain
in.
lube with you?
I didn't. I normally would, but I did not that time. So I
Sure.
stopped there to buy some. You
What
know, in
lube
case I
were
happened
you
again.
using? What lube did you put on your bike for the trip?
Actually, it was another bike shop that had it.
Which will remain nameless.
Yes.
Do you know what lube they use?
They use that White Lightning grease. And,
White Lightning. So stay away from all White Lightning products, everybody.
I mean, it works.
If you're at Walmart and you have to buy, and you like don't have a bike shop nearby, and you have to buy lube, you can use it, but bring it with you on your ride so you can reapply it midway.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing is I think it works really well for, a more casual ride. But whenever I'm putting that much mileage on, especially when I'm kind of getting some dust and stuff, like it wears off very fast. And so I was not only hearing it, but I was feeling it, and I'm like, I can't do that. But yeah, I just went to this random bike shop that happened to be a mile and a half from my hotel in Mount Vernon, where I didn't think there would be a bike shop.
Lucky for you, there was a local bike shop nearby.
Yep, and he knew who you were.
You weren't able to order online your lubricant. Amazon, I have had certain things being free overnight delivery. Like a lock picking set I had to get to break into my truck. They delivered that the next morning at 7 a.m., which was pretty interesting. But my point is, if you would like to be able to always have a bike shop there when you need it, then make a point of going down to the bike shop and buying stuff, even if it might be a little bit more convenient sometimes to just press a few buttons on your phone.
Yeah, I can't
be
remember.
patient with them.
I think I've ordered like one thing from Amazon in the last 3 years. Like, it's not a thing I do.
Yeah. So you got lube. What kind of lube did you go with?
I got some Pedros
lube.
Yeah, which is a lot.
Was it a dry lube, ceramic lube? Do you remember?
That I don't know, because I didn't end up using any of my bottle. I just used, like, he had done it in the shop, and I don't remember what he wanted me to use was going to be a wet lube, because he's like, you definitely prefer a wetter chain when you ride. And like, I've never heard that before, but he's like, you don't like the sound of even like a dry lube being used.
Yeah, because not everybody notices when their chain's dry. I would say a lot of riders do not notice when their chain's dry. But since you noticed, then as a experienced bike shop owner, what do you remember the name of the bike shop?
It was B&C.
B&C.
B&C, yeah.
Okay.
Cycles.
Right.
And fitness, I think, is also in the title. Yeah.
So they're in Mount Vernon. So obviously really nice and attentive person for him to kind of pick up on that about you, and then be able to then refer a product deeper level. Whereas normally it would just be like, yeah, obviously I would buy the dry lube. Whereas he knew to, from talking to you and paying attention, that you would appreciate something a little bit different. So did he put wet lube on your chain?
He did.
Okay. Yeah. And then that lasted the entire rest of the time you rode your bike. So another 100, well, more than that, because you rode a ton once you actually got home and did all that. So
I did 615 miles in 10 days effectively. Like, just between the trip and just getting there and seeing people that I hadn't for a long time. And that's where my core cycling group is. So I kind of know where, if I want to ride with people, I can. I know all the routes there by heart, because that's, just where I started. But, I had never had to touch the bike again.
So I don't know how much you want to get into this or not, because we discussed it a little bit earlier. But I think, now that you've sorted your way to back to Indiana or Louisville.
You're getting better.
I try to stick my tongue in the back of my throat and say it. I don't know. I'll have a few beers, maybe. Maybe I'll just
that. Honestly, you probably have to be a little bit buzzed to say it right.
Right.
I mean, everybody in Louisville's half drunk anyway.
Okay. So you did some group rides and stuff like that, and I think I put in the description we were going to discuss a little bit. I don't want to get too much into it, but I don't
somebody
care.
Can learn something from it.
But being a chick and showing up to group rides, I think road is a little bit worse. It probably happens on mountain bike rides too, but it can be intimidating for women. And as guys, we may not always realize, like, we may think we're being encouraging, or we may be thinking we're being welcoming, or, if a girl shows up on a ride that's normally a bunch of dudes, like we try to maybe treat her like we do everybody else, or maybe we give extra compliments or whatever else, because we think that's what's gonna kind of be the nicest thing. But like when you were talking, it doesn't always come across that way. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of discuss that a little bit, just so as guys we know, like, it's not just like pandering, or like, what do you call it when, like, not pandering, but like you give people compliments, maybe really don't deserve them, and you just kind of like overdo it and you're overly nice. And maybe you kind of do that to compensate, because guys are awkward around girls, whether, a guy doesn't have to be interested in a girl to just for it to be weird that a girl's around, if you're used to girls not being around for something. So, I think that happens, but I'll let you talk, because I don't.
So the experience that I had was definitely a group where most of them knew of me, because, again, that was the community that I was in. There's also a shortage of women that are in kind of the more race-minded cycling community. So I had been gone from Louisville for a while, but the core people in that group knew who I was. And so kind of, one of the first encounters that I had was somebody mistaking me for somebody else. And they're like, "Oh, I'm sorry. You've slimmed down since then." And the weird thing was that I had not. It was, you could have left it with, "Oh, I'm sorry, I mistook you for somebody else." But then you made it about, "Oh, I was actually looking at your physique harder." And so then I'm kind of like, okay, I am aware men do that biologically, but I'm like, now I'm like, all right, now what else is happening?
Probably the main principle men judge women by, unfortunately.
And then it didn't stop there. We got, into like the tougher part of the route on this ride. And I'll preface this, but I know no harm.
So maybe it's always awkward, even if you're giving a nice compliment. Never, probably for a girl that you don't know, especially if you don't know her at all, maybe not a good idea even to say it looks like you've dropped a few pounds.
Yes.
That's an awkward thing to say, because it insinuates a bunch of other things.
Yes, it does. Yeah. And I mean, like, it was
Whereas you would say that to your buddy, be like, "Hey, dude, what the F? You lost all kinds of weight. What the hey, man?"
It was also from a person that I know does do that for.
Sure.
That it isn't just an innocent comment.
It's an opening line of sorts.
So it was like there was kind of a double. Yeah, I don't think it was intentional, again, but it was also kind of like, you're just unaware. But we get further into the ride, and so somebody says, like, "Well, the skinny thing up here," when I'm climbing in front of them. I'm like, again, not only am I being stared at, but it's just like, "Oh, well, she's so skinny." Like, of course.
How long was this ride?
It was 40. I ended up with 46 miles at the end of it.
Average speed?
18.3.
Okay.
I mean, like, it was,
a lot of elevation, or?
A lot of elevation in one section.
Okay.
So it was mostly flat, a lot of like smashing through the city, like a lot of stop and go. So I mean, like 18.3 was pretty decent pace for having to do that. And then with a major climb. But when we got,
what speed were you guys like averaging when you were like cruising, would you say? Do you know?
There was one point towards the end where I looked down and we're going 32.
Jesus Christ. Up a hill?
No, flat with green lights.
Still.
But like 25 kind of was, good cruising pace for us.
Okay.
I mean, and it was a lot of guys that had ridden with each other often, so they were kind of aware of, this person's in front, like, give them a break. Let's say, it was organized. Right. It was a safe group to ride with. And so that's why I showed up, and my best friend was riding there. So of course I'm going to go while I'm in town. But just like the underhanded comments that weren't innately meant to be anything at all, were highly uncomfortable for me, because I am being singled out as the woman, the token woman on the ride. That is not flattering to me, because I am there as another cyclist that clearly belongs there, because I'm keeping pace with you all. Why can't you just leave it at that?
After riding 500 miles.
And I did make that note. And there was one individual there that I knew who I was. And again, a person that had made questionable comments for on me before,
Mhm.
and I'm like, that is not okay. And they just proceeded to then pretend they didn't know who I was. They're like, who is that? It's just and it's like you can't even acknowledge. I'm like, I'm not desecrating anybody.
Right.
I'm not calling them names. I'm like, well, you're just an a-hole. I don't do that. I just say, this is what happened and this is why it makes me uncomfortable. And the ones that want to argue with me about that for my own personal experience are the ones I now feel like I have to stay away from because they don't respect me, not just as a woman, but as a person in general.
Right.
And that happens repetitively in the cycling world, especially when you're the only woman to show up.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, I'm trying to like consider it from like a guy's standpoint because I know I'm guilty of the same stuff. As far as like, it's hard if a woman shows up just to look at, and it happens eventually. I think with mountain biking, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. I don't have any experience with the road, so I really can't say that. But I think like mountain bike chicks end up just being like outdoorsy girls, and eventually the fact that like I feel like it happens a little bit quicker where you forget they're a girl. You know what I
And
mean?
that's what I wish would happen. Like, I don't mind,
Because with
especially
the baggy clothes and the helmet, maybe, but then everyone's wearing is the same outfit you're wearing,
Yeah.
so you guys all look the same anyway.
It's just like,
I don't know.
Like if I have a repertoire,
I should have thought this through before we brought it up.
No, like live feedback is good. But I think when you have like a relationship with a group like that that banter can be fine depending on the individual.
Yeah.
But if somebody's like not around very often and you're just automatically, let me make comments about her appearance, maybe that's not such a good, because I can imagine if I was a new person to the group and I didn't already kind of have a feel for how they were, another woman may have never showed up to that ride again.
Right.
Yeah, because they felt singled out.
And I don't think, obviously anybody listening at this point is probably not a very narcissistic person, or you wouldn't listen to other people talk for 2 hours. But like, I think it's important. Like, I know on our rides, like when we used to do group rides, like we'd have a Sunday ride, and that would get all kinds of just brand spanking new beginners who we'd even bring a bike for, all the way up to people who've been riding for a while and just want to do a casual ride with a group or whatever it may be. But, we would have women show up, obviously, to the ride. And then there would be dudes that, you would hear them start to make comments, or, when it's just kind of the guys. And I was always really vigilant about shutting that down. And so were, the other guys in the group, because, and like the couple guys that I'm thinking of that we had to like talk to and say something to were not bad guys. Like,
and I don't
they weren't creeps. They weren't whatever, and they just did not hit them like, oh yeah, that's really uncomfortable that I'm doing that, and that's not what this person came here for.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't come here to meet me. Like, I know you're excited that you've seen a girl who's into bikes and she's cute or whatever, but like, that's not what she's here for. She did not come here to meet you or to be hit on by you. Trust me, if she's into you, you'll know.
I don't inherently think that anybody has ill intent when it's just that kind of thing.
Yeah. But it's a responsibility of other guys to then step in the group and say something to that guy, be like, hey, like, this is uncomfortable. Like, give her some space, or like, like,
and it'll go a step further too when, some women are less, like, I will pick my battles, but I have absolutely no issue advocating for myself in those instances. And when you are the woman that's like, hey, I'm not okay with that behavior, a lot of them have gotten very reactive with me and be like, well, this, like, I've been called a feminazi. And like, all because I didn't want you to make it, like, at the very least, even though you shouldn't really be saying it at all, like, you need to nip that line of thinking in the butt. At least don't say it within earshot.
Right.
And that's what was
especially
happening.
If they really thought that you were a feminist, to then call you a name like that, it could only go terribly.
Yeah.
Like, that would never be a good idea. Like, that would be the last person you want to say that to, because a feminist is going to, like, if you think she's mad now,
your ass on fire.
Yeah, call her a feminist and then see what happens.
But
like, it's not going to go well for you.
This theme has made me leave bread and butter jobs at bike shops
Yeah.
because of that. And it was just like, I'm okay being a learning moment if that's what I have to do to say, hey, maybe you should think about this behavior.
Right.
And then just not taking it lightly.
Right.
So, and then I have to like, okay, now I have to protect myself and isolate myself from this specific person.
Right.
Like it can have this chain.
Are those
effect.
typically like specific dudes? Like, do you kind of know, like, when you're in a group or after like a first conversation with somebody, like, oh God, this is one of those creeps? Like, is it just certain people that are like that? I don't know.
When it gets that bad, yes, but
Right.
I do think that the mentality kind of exists. I wouldn't say a majority, but a wide, like, and it makes me just kind of like, I'm not really going to talk to anybody.
Mhm.
And I did say that at one point during the ride because I didn't know who was looking at me and like, oh, I'm behind the woman. That, like, I don't know as if many of them actually acknowledge me my name either. But I was just, they're like, oh, you're kicking ass for a girl kind of thing. And I'm just kind of like, I'm just here trying to blend in.
Just
like,
here kicking ass.
And I said, like, I just want to blend in and ride my bike. And they're like, well, you're not blending in, you're kicking out. And they think it's a compliment. But again, I'm being picked up from the group and I'm being set out here.
Right.
And so I'm out here on my own. And I start feeling like I'm not really welcome here.
Right.
I'm under a microscope.
Right.
And
you're the token, which I thought was an interesting way you put that for. I was like, ugh, yeah, that's a good point.
That's not an original. I've been like, that's
right.
The observation's been made, from other people that do understand kind of how I see it, have used that statement. But I mean, like in Louisville with the clicky, and it's everywhere. It's not just Louisville. That's where my experience has been. The groups, they have those women that show this one shows up to this ride and this one shows up to this ride. Mm-hmm. This one is on this team. Mm-hmm. And it's like, we're
all happy to have when women want to join our group, because there is and that's a lot of like, it's a lot of like, it's good for guys, like, we like hanging out with other dudes and being dudes and saying obnoxious things that we would not say around women. And then, but it's also nice to have feminine energy around. Mm-hmm. So I think like with these rides and these groups and stuff, a lot of times for guys, the reason why groups are so excited when like, when you're like, oh yeah, this girl's finally, we finally got a girl, because it's nice to have feminine energy around,
And I think a lot of it is born out of that. It is fairly innocent. But again, if somebody's saying, hey, I don't really like that attention, then be like, got it.
Right.
Won't happen again. But that's not been my experience a lot of times. It's like, how dare you?
You need to start mountain biking more. This is your problem. It would still happen mountain biking, but like you can be aggressive, because mountain biking is aggressive. Like they don't expect you to be like dainty at all. Not that road bikers are dainty.
I think historically road cyclists that get into mountain biking, they have road fitness, and so they're just kind of instantly like climbing hills, just like they've been doing it the whole time.
Right. Yeah, you'd be fine. Yeah. And then you could, I think, I don't know. There's probably an issue with it. I'm just going to say, what? 9 times. I don't want to talk about girl issues.
Complex issues. Yeah, this would go on for 7 hours if we got into all of it, dude, and still not be done.
I have 4 sisters and a daughter, so I do understand the female's perspective somewhat, but not when it comes to athletics and that kind of changes.
There's a disparity between like women on women too, because I know there are probably a handful of women that like that kind of like, and I just personally don't.
That's where my head went with like the guy who maybe is over the top with it. It's like, did he come across a girl like early on that like that were that soak that stuff up? Like the whole reason she goes to a ride is because she gets to wear a skin tight outfit and
she's the only one.
And all the boys are looking at her. So I'm sure there's that, and that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people doing that, but and that might be where some of these guys take it from, because they're used to because most girls end up feeling like you when they go on a ride or they get into a group, to where they go, they kind of get that feeling, and maybe it's not overt, but it's kind of that like subconsciously like, oh, look at you, look how fast you're
It's
going, look at you go.
subliminal messaging.
Yeah, and then after like 3 or 4 rides, you're just like, I just don't feel good after riding with these people, and maybe like you say, it was nothing overt, and then girls don't show up. So maybe the girls who do consistently show up are those girls who do thrive off of that type of attention. And then so then those dudes, they're only used to seeing those girls, so then they apply that to everyone. It's great that we live in a world now where we can just make excuses for everybody for anything that happens. I do love it. Everything's so subjective.
I just want to live.
Nothing's set in stone. Good luck.
I want to be a part of something where I show up to a ride and people are like, oh shit.
Okay. You want people to fear you when you show up.
Not
fear your ability.
In a competitive way, yes.
Right.
Not
God damn it. She's gonna push the pace. Now I gotta keep up with her.
I did end up with 2 Strava QLMs from doing that.
I thought so, like with having the bike shop and then trying to get the park open and stuff, like I've had to be fairly public, and we're at an hour, so we'll probably end this. But I had to be really public. So anytime I'm like around, like especially in Eureka, most everybody knows me. So if I go places, like I'll notice people, staring at me or, saying hello, whatever. And really around a good amount of St. Louis, I can, wherever I go, I'm likely going to run into somebody I know, or someone's going to look familiar, or, something's going to happen. And then when I go out of town, nobody knows who I am. And sometimes it gets a little bit old because, there's also hate, like people who aren't in the cycling industry don't understand all that bike shop politics that goes on. So ridiculous, but I won't get into that nonsense. But so it was kind of like that thing. I feel like I'm like always being watched, or like for a while, like every time I show up to the park, like I went on my board once and some guys crabbing on Facebook about me. It's like, God damn it, I can't freaking do anything without people having a problem, or, talking crap, or spreading rumors, or running their mouths about stuff. So I was like, it would be nice to be, but then I go places where no one knows who I am anymore, and that's not that great either. So all I'm saying is,
I like being an unknown.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying maybe it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not great, but I guess my thing is, you're getting some attention. Maybe there's a different way, but there's no way of fixing creepy dudes. That's the problem. Because I'm assuming everyone's got good intentions.
That's what I've had to do, yeah. And I've got to be zip quick with reading it.
All right. Well, I think we can end it. I think I stuttered and stammered over my own words enough, but everything you said was super interesting, and I think people got a lot out of that. So they shouldn't care that I said too many times.
We're human.
Yeah. And maybe next time I'll study up on, I'll do some women's studies, and then I'll come back and I'll talk with a good answer. I don't know. All right. Well, next week.